It's a pleasure to be with everyone today. As mentioned, I'd encourage questions as we go along here. Hopefully we spur some discussion, some debate that can happen as we wind down the prepared segment. So in the chat button, just feel free to enter your questions there, and at the end, we'll try to address them. I can assure you that no questions are off limits, so feel free to address them. Knowing the panelists as I do, I'm certain they will give you very honest and candid responses. So my name is Jason Corsello with Cornerstone On Demand. The good news and the bad news of today's panelists or panel presentation is we've got some amazing panelists, two in particular. William Tincup and Katherine Jones are with us today. Unfortunately, Ray Wang couldn't make it today. For anyone that knows Ray, he is always traveling out and about, and I assume he's somewhere lost in travel as we speak. But
I'm here.
Oh, there he is. Oh, he did show up. Ray, good to have you, buddy.
I'm here. Yeah,
I got scared. I thought you were somewhere lost in some part of the world, but it's great to have you.
I'm live here at Katherine Bay.
Oh, well, lucky you. So we do have Ray, and we've got William, and we've got Katherine. A quick introduction on each one of them, and then we'll jump into the meat of the discussion. I've had the pleasure of knowing all three of these folks for probably close to a decade or so. William Tincup is the founder and principal analyst at Key Interval Research, a relatively new firm, and doing some really great stuff in understanding HR technology, and has published some more recent stuff on working with vendors. So, William, if you're there, please introduce yourself and say hi.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I think you covered it. Key Interval launched last year at HR Tech, and actually I'm here with two of the people that are, I guess, mentors and folks that are inspired John and I. Both Ray and Katherine are people that when we first set up the analyst firm we'd look to as kind of ideals to become. So happy to be here, and look forward to kind of hashing out the topics.
Awesome. Thank you, William. Next up is Ray, who you just met. Ray is the founder, principal analyst, and chairman of Constellation Research. I've known Ray for a number of years. He's been a very outspoken industry analyst for many years and blazing the trail in a new influencer community. So Ray, please say hi and share anything you'd like to share.
Hey, thanks a lot. I just saw William and KJ all at the same event earlier, so it's kind of fun to see the community as we go along. Thanks for the kind words on the starting out an analyst firm, and I guess the gloves come off in a few seconds.
All right. Last and certainly not least is Dr. Katherine Jones. Katherine has done a lot of amazing research at Burson by Deloitte. She is the VP of HCM Technology Research. Great to have her here, and love her to share a few words and see if she's got her gloves prepared.
I do have my gloves prepared, boy. And the task we will have with these two formidable contestants that we're dealing with. Luckily, we're all friends, so it's going to be a good conversation. And thank you very much, Jason.
Awesome. So the format for today, we're trying to do something a little bit different. And the concept is we've got prepared about 10 topics. Hopefully we get to most of them, if not all of them. But what we wanted to do is share a topic and allow the panelists to discuss, debate, hopefully create some fireworks, and just rapid fire go through each one of those. And the concept that we have today is kind of a buy, sell, hold, meaning if they buy the concept and the idea, that means they're bullish on it for HR. If they're selling it, the idea is they're calling. They're not as bullish on the concept, and we can kind of talk through that. And if they're hold on the concept, it's kind of a let's wait and see. Let's wait and see how the things develop. So we're going to knock through a number of different topics today, and we wanted to start with employee engagement. What I could tell you is we don't have any formal responses, so this is going to be rapid fire, hopefully lively discussion. No one knows who's going to be called on, so hopefully it will result in some fun fireworks here. So the first topic is really, as I mentioned, on an employee engagement. It's something that is lots of chatter today. You read various reports out there, some that Burson has published, and other such as Gallup, that basically say employees today are just not engaged. I think a recent Gallup poll showed that only 13% of the global workforce is highly engaged. Now, you can debate on what's engaged versus not engaged, but there's an overall consensus that employees just aren't engaged today. So I wanted Katherine to lead us off here and give her kind of buy, sell, hold recommendations here, and kind of talk through her reasoning. So Katherine, take it away.
Hey, great. Well, we found out in a Deloitte study called the Global Human Capital Trends that cultural engagement edged out leadership, which was a big problem last year, went down to number 2 this year, as the most significant and important challenge facing HR today globally. Huge thing. However, how are we going to do this? Can HR actually, are they in a position to improve engagement? Who's responsible for engagement? Do we know that doing surveys is even going to help tell you what your engagement is? Well, what about culture? How are we going to do that? We've got glass ceilings, we've got this discrepant diversity, we've got this corporate yank and rank stuff that happens with performance. What do you think? I'm thinking it's a hold until we can actually figure out how we can improve engagement. William?
Agree or disagree, William?
Yeah, I'm on the hold side of engagement as well, and for just similar but different reasons. I think it's something you do along the way to something else. So the way you break engagement, people or gurus, is at the end of the day, if you get production, if you get yield, yet the person isn't engaged, then do you care about engagement? Take an example of a person that's your best salesperson. And let's say you defined engagement by they come in early, they stay late, it's discretionary effort, they attend your corporate events, etc. Well, take your best salesperson, and let's say she kills her quotas, yet she shows up on time, leaves on time, never attends any of your corporate events, etc. So the way that you define engagement, she is not engaged, yet she's producing. So if in that instance, do you care about engagement? No, of course not. You care about it if you can get production and if you can retain your top talent. If you can't do those things, there's probably an engagement problem along the way. So that's why I'm not a seller of engagement, but I'm not a buyer of it as well. I think that there's another end goal, and it's not engagement.
So it sounds like you think that this whole concept of engagement probably needs to be somewhat redefined. True? Not true?
Yeah, no, it's exactly true. It's like I don't believe in the assessment category. I believe assessments actually should be baked into other things. There's pre-hire assessments, leadership assessments, etc. But I don't think of the assessment category as a category. I kind of think the same way around engagement. It's towards what end do you care about engagement?
Ray, what do you think here? You seem to be a bit of a contrarian here, comparison to William and Katherine.
I am a total contrarian. I'm in buy mode, but here's the issue. Engagement is what we need, right? We need it. It's the heart of the change management piece. But calling it engagement, that's where it's dead, right? You do not call this thing engagement. It's basically what we're doing is smartly engineering a set of incentivized gamification principles, right? And this is really about value exchange, right? What is it that you get to motivate someone to do something? And the engagement part is important, right? On one hand, yes, I want someone engaged, working really hard, getting their stuff delivered on a productive side. On the other hand, I want engagement on the ideation and on the innovation side. Those are different things. And so understanding what the motivations and the drivers are will get you to the same result. And we got to do this all before the 2020 robot revolution takes hold and we're all out of a job. But that being said, right, I mean, engagement is still hot. We really do need to get people, let's say we took engagement out of work and said we want people involved. And I think we'd have a very different conversation. So I'm still bullish on the concept, not on the terminology.
So why does engagement matter if the robots are taking over here in the next 5 years?
Your company may be out of business in 5. Better hurry now. I'm just kidding.
No, it's an interesting topic. I mean, I'm seeing interesting technology of people trying to solve what may or may not be an engagement problem, but I think it's pretty simple, right? It is if you give people interesting things to work on, you have a great culture that is founded in values and a mission, and you reduce the friction in the organization, it's a pretty easy path to engagement. But maybe I'm just a simplist here. Let's move on to our second topic, a topic near and dear to my heart, and that's this whole topic of big data, or probably more of what I like to just refer to as data, because data, I think, comes in all shapes and sizes. But as we talk about big data, or probably the output of big data in HR, which is more around analytics and predictive analytics, it's becoming a big topic. I know you guys have been at an conference this week, a vendor conference. I know that you guys have probably been at many conferences over the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure it's a topic that comes up at many of those. But I'm curious to get your take, and I'll start back with Ray here on this whole idea of big data. Is it real? Is HR prepared? And what do you think needs to happen? So Ray, take it away.
So definitely, you're going to think I'm just a bull, but there are some areas I'm going to be on sell. But I'm definitely hot on big data and talent analytics. Data is basically a foundation of all the changes that are happening. We're in the middle of what a lot of people are calling a digital transformation. This digital transformation cannot exist without having that data in place. The problem is, how do we get to the right context? And what we're really trying to get to is, as a concept one of my colleagues, Alan Leposky, loves, it's personal analytics. What are the things that are there to help the individual be successful? And then there are the talent analytics. What are things that are required for the employer to be successful in creating that environment? It's every interaction, it's the conversation, it's the work habits, it's the performance. How do we put that into context? It's people's interests and motivations, it's what they've expressed and what we've guessed on a prediction level. And what we're really trying to do is create this intention-driven approach to what happens next. Now that sounds very, very fluffy. And so what we're really trying to do is take a set of data and bring all that data into a stream of information that fits within different sets of HR processes, people processes. Take that and start figuring out patterns. One of the things I want to know is, why in the world did those 5 community college kids kick everyone else's butt in terms of sales, right? Maybe it's not the school you went to. Maybe it's 15 other things, right? I want to know, why in the world did last year's Ivy League recruiting class fail so miserably in terms of the number of folks that actually made it to the next level, right? So it's things like that you just want to look at the patterns and try to understand what it is and see where you can actually make better decisions. So ultimately, we take those insights and we want to get to democratizing decision-making so everyone else can see these patterns and have some transparency. So that's why I'm really bullish on this.
Ray, do you think organizations have that data that they need today to make those assessments on, where are my best people coming from?
Oh, they totally do. It's on Post-it pads, Excel spreadsheets, and paper.
Okay. So it sounds like the gap is more not necessarily in the technology, but the resources and the skill set.
No, the gap is the fact it's all on paper. The gap is everything's in analog and hard to find. That's actually the challenge. And so, so
I think the bigger gap is the ability to even understand analytics. Sometimes I'm impressed with how the vendors have started to add a lot of better reporting into their HR and talent programs. But what's kind of scary, I think, is if we look at things like predictive analytics, not that you can predict that somebody is going to leave or that somebody is going to be a high performer, but what happens with that in the hands of people who may not quite understand a statistic and where that data comes from? And I'm going to make a decision about somebody's life inappropriately because I'm looking at a number and saying, oh, well, she's a high risk, therefore she's going to go anyway. I won't bother to put her in an L&D program, or, I won't invest in her because she's going to leave, when the answer should be, we're going to invest in her to keep her to stay. But that's the fear is, we don't have a very high degree of analytical capabilities in many of our HR departments today, and I think that's a problem.
William, you agree or disagree, and share your thoughts either way.
Sure, I'm buyer of this, and the thing is, it's a retooling. I think Katherine and Ray have both been spot on so far, that you've got, at the end of the day, you've got HR leaders that are more anecdotal, they're comfortable with their gut, comfortable with their experience, and it's almost like what happened in marketing 15, 20 years ago, where marketing, especially advertising, was Globe cigarettes and berets, and it was discussions of Manet and Monet, and all of a sudden you fast forward to now, and you can't find a marketer that can actually have an art discussion. They don't exist, because they've all become scientists, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. What we're witnessing, what the four of us are witnessing, is that kind of transformation of some are going to get it, some aren't, and I mean get it as in they're going to want data to help them make decisions. But I think that until we see it show up in academia, until we see it show up in SHRM and other things like that, they need to be retaught how to actually do science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM.
So you're saying HR professionals need...
It's stuck in
Sorry,
neutral.
go ahead, Katherine.
I said analytics is stuck in neutral until we can do that.
Yeah.
William's absolutely right.
Well,
does that mean that we need more artists and mathematicians in HR, William?
No. We need more mathematicians for sure. But it's also a burden, ironically. It's a burden right now on the vendors to come to the table. Katherine talked about better dashboards, but a dashboard doesn't tell you what to do. It just renders, red, yellow, green, etc., and you still have to have an idea of what to do with that. So I think we're going to see waves of insights as a service where the software vendors are probably going to lead some of this change by saying, hey, this is what we're seeing in the data, and here's what you should do with it. Because if the vendors don't do that, they don't have the natural skill set to do it themselves.
I agree with what William's saying here, because a lot of what's happening is that we've got a lot of information, but what do we do next? And that insight to action path, that's going to start coming from the vendors as really ways to help people make better sets of decisions. And so when that starts happening and saying, hey, by the way, you got this guy that's been truant 57 days out of the year, but, they're driving like 80% of the revenue. Can you have a talk with them instead of fire them? Okay, great. Let's go do that. Right? That's the suggestion. And it's those set of suggestions in machine learning, as some people are talking about, where natural language processing is going, where all these future augmented humanity pieces are happening. And I know I'm out in la-la land, but when we get there, that's where we're going to be able to make better sets of decisions.
So when is when? Is this start to happen in 2015? Is it 2016? Since you and Ray and William are bullish here, give me some predictions on timing here.
Hey, William, when do you think the robots are going to take over and unionize?
I'm very comfortable with the 2020 goal. I'm on board with that. I think you're already starting, Jason. I think you're already starting to see vendors. If at any point you're starting to see right now that vendors are already starting to go down this path. They themselves also have to go through a change, because it's not just about software. And so this goes for, software is great. We all love software, but at the end of the day, that audience needs something more out of the software. They can't get it because they don't, by and large, have the skills. The software vendors themselves are starting to, they're starting to see that, and I think the better ones are saying we need to actually get them to not just see the data, but understand the data, and then decision tree from that data.
Yeah, as the sole vendor representative here, I think there is a big technology shift that needs to happen as well, right? I mean, all of this new technology that necessarily wasn't available 3 or 4 years ago, that's provided through Hadoop, and being able to do machine learning, I think greatly accelerates the path. And so I guess I'm with you, Ray and William, that I'm very bullish here. I think it's sooner than we know, but I think hopefully we start to see a lot of the outcomes of these big data strategies here starting even this year. Let's move on to the next topic here. I know that was a good one, and hopefully we keep some level of agreement. But I want to try to create some discussion or debate as well here. So maybe this is our one, and it's really around this concept of the overloaded employee. We've done some research ourselves that says that employees are just overloaded with work, right? They're doing multiple jobs. Our survey suggested that almost 70% of employees are overloaded, and it was actually a huge step-up increase from the prior year in 2013. So I'm going to kick it off here with William. Do you think employees are overwhelmed? Do you think they're just being too annoyed, or that they're just with the quote-unquote rise of millennials, that the concept of work is changing? Give me your thoughts here on this whole idea of employee morale and our employees kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed today.
I think, I don't think it's just a today thing. I think when we put things in front of our employees that don't really help them do their job better, then that becomes a stressor. If it's something that helps them do their job, it actually enables their success. It doesn't matter the number of technologies. But people are, they're ruthless with their time, and as well they should be. If it helps me do my job, I'm logging in, I'm doing the bit. If it doesn't help me, I'm stressed out. So I think one of the things we have to look at as employers are the things that we're asking of people. It's not about a too much or too little. It really becomes a game of, is this actually helping them do their job? And if not, well, then take it off the list. Like loading get rid of some of the burden. But I think people are fairly ruthless at work. If it helps me do the job, I'm going to use the tool. And if it doesn't, I won't.
Ray, what are your thoughts here? I think you're probably a bit more opinionated on this one.
All right.
Is that the right word?
So I am on the sell side. So tough luck. If you can't cut it, you shouldn't be in the workplace. HR didn't do their job on the front end. You're supposed to weed out these wimps. So that's my point of view, and I'm sticking to it.
Boom. All right, Katherine, what do you think here?
Well, I think that our overloadedness happened kind of in the recession, where people were suddenly doing the job of 2 or 3 people because of layoffs and all that sort of thing. And I think that burdensome just rather continued, and people kind of bucked up and went about doing maybe more than than logical to do. But unless you're, have the vision of your employee is like a poor little mule lugging something that weighs 8,000 pounds behind him. And I'm not sure that this is an HR question that much, though, because I think we need to look at burdensomeness in terms of, is this something HR can do, and how does it relate to engagement? If you've got people who are constantly totally overburdened, that's not good. If you can't feel like you can do your job because you've got too much to do, that's something that somebody should look at. But it seems like that's a management concern, that maybe your direct manager should know that you can't possibly ever finish anything because there's too much to be finished, as opposed to a generic HR concern.
What you're saying is it's less of an HR problem and more of a manager, and probably a manager training problem to identify just the overall morale, if you will, or workload of their respective employees. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah. Good job.
Okay.
You're way too kind. You're way too kind. Unless you got a work council, you're way too kind. No, I'm kidding.
Well.
No, very good points.
All right, so let's move on to the next topic here, and the widely debated and always discussion for fodder is just this whole function of HR and kind of where we're at. Are we where we need to be? Do we sense that HR today is relatively aligned with the business? I probably have some opinions here, and I may or may not share them, but I'm going to kick it off to Ray here and give you your take. You talk to lots of HR departments, lots of HR leaders. Are they at the caliber that they need to be? Is there a gap? Give me your take here.
So here's the challenge, right? We have this thing called the corporate hierarchy of needs, and it looks like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where you have the bottom is keep me safe, keep me sheltered, get me fed, and the top is the part around your ego. It happens in the corporate world too, and so the bottom part is regulatory compliance, don't get me killed, don't get me sued, and don't get me fired. And then the next level is operational efficiency, and then the next level is growing revenue, and then the next level is digital transformation, and the highest level is brand. Unfortunately, it's a pyramid, and that pyramid is basically how we allocate our resources, our time, and our budgets. Unfortunately, HR spends all its time trying to enforce what the rules are and enforcing the legal piece. So if we can get out of moving from that point, then yes, then we can actually start talking about people strategy at the boardroom level and not another relook at HR. And that's really what the problem is. We're all focused on regulatory and operational efficiency. That part gets automated. If we can flatten that pyramid to make it a square, what we'll end up having is more time to actually talk about business model, the type of people we should hire, the talent strategies, all that kind of the stuff that really needs to be done. So that's kind of why I'm more on the sell side on this one.
And Katherine, it sounds like you're probably agreeable with Ray. We'll let William be disagreeable. Why don't you be agreeable?
There's a couple things here. One is, again, when we look at that human capital management trend study, HR gave themselves a C- in terms of their effectiveness. And the business leaders gave them a D-. So clearly, first, there's a discrepancy in how badly the business people feel that HR is doing, but not even a lot of positive. Even a B, a C+ is better than a C- in terms of how HR is even rating themselves in terms of their total effectiveness and the ability to do what they think they should be doing. So, is that a functional crossroads? I think it's more I don't know, almost a tragedy, but something that we need to figure out. If we need HR, we've got to get it doing what it's supposed to be doing and not something that either they don't think they should do or the business doesn't think they should do.
William.
So I don't think it's as stark as what we might imagine.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually think that HR, when you get them alone and you just talk to them about how things, they, like every other siloed position, they would say, well, it's okay, but there's a whole lot of things that we could be working on. It's really the portrayal of HR that all of us get sucked into. There's an echo chamber of 500 HR and recruiting bloggers out there in the world. There's every vendor, the 22,000 software vendors in our space, they're all content marketers. So if you think about this, a decade ago, I could have written an article that said that here's the 7 things that are wrong with HR, and here's how to fix it. That would have got a ton of shares and comments and et cetera. Today, if I wrote the exact same article, no one would read it. And the thing is, the real reason that is because I didn't say the 7 effing things that are wrong with HR, and here's how to effing fix it. Because people, to get noticed, to get clicks, to get shares, you got to be that much more over the top. And so I take all that with a grain of salt that most HR pros, if you just talk to them alone, yes, things could be better. Just like Katherine said, yes, things could be better. They probably grade themselves pretty harshly, but they're not as stark as what's portrayed of them in the media, on TV, in blogs, etc. And so I kind of look at it and say, you know what? You could say this about operations. You could say it about finance. You could say it about marketing or sales. But I don't think it's as bad as what people would like to think it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, I get to talk to a lot of our clients, and I think that they probably have high ambitions. They probably over mitigate risk, but they're extremely sharp organizations, and I think a lot of organizations have made significant strides even in the last 3 years to become more technology savvy, to use data more in their decisions, to really, think about things like engagement and culture, whether they're, doing anything about it or not. But I agree with you. I don't think it's as stark as most would kind of lead you to believe. But I do think that things are evolving extremely fast, and I think that a lot of HR departments just need to continue to fuel the skill sets, the desire to adapt to the business. Because I read something the other day, and it's something that's probably been fairly popularly published over the last kind of couple of months, but the Fortune 500 companies of 10 years ago and 15 years ago, many of them no longer exist. And you have these new companies that have been started over the last 3 to 5 years that are now $20 billion, $30 billion market cap companies. So the pace of change within organizations are moving fast, and industries are being disrupted extremely fast. And so, I think those companies that are moving aggressively, a lot of them in Silicon Valley, but even outside of Silicon Valley, I mean, they are very HR savvy organizations, very people savvy. But let's move on. I'll get off my my soapbox here, and we can move to the next topic here. And this one's probably more a bit HR technology centric, so I'll kind of be quiet here and allow you guys to pontificate. And it's really around the HR technology itself, and probably more specifically user adoption. It's something we as a vendor care about. We want our clients and our users to be using our software all of the time. But I'm curious to get your take on how important is it for organizations, and probably more specifically the success for an organization. Do they need to be using HR technology all of the time? I think, William, you touched on this a little bit, but maybe I'll let you kick it off here around this whole idea of user adoption. I know it's an important one that you've talked about in your past, but why don't you kick us off here on this whole concept of user adoption?
So I'm a huge buyer of this, and I consulted for 5 years about user adoption. It's the levers in which you can pull to get people to use and consume and adopt technology. A lot of it starts with training, change management, etc. But getting the use out of the application is really a game for both players. It's a game for a vendor, and it's a game for practitioners, the goal of which is to get maximum value out of the tool. I've since, probably in the last 60 days, I've actually come to the realization that user adoption isn't the end goal. Kind of like engagement, isn't the end goal. The end goal for all software folks is user satisfaction, i.e. the concept that a user can love the software that they use, that they can be happy in the software that they use. So it isn't so much about pulling the levers to just get them to use it, because that sounds like gunpoint. I don't want them to just use it. I think that the goal, and again, I think both practitioner, buyers, and sellers of software, I think the goal is to create software that people love to use. But usage is still, to me, usage is critical, because if you don't use it, you're not going to get your investment. You're not going to reap the rewards of your investment.
Katherine, what do you think here?
Well, I agree with that. And I really think that one of the important things is that no user will use something that he or she doesn't like, if he hates it, unless he actually has to. And in some of the cases, there are things like maybe time, keeping track of time, doing your expense accounts, all sorts of things that are those have-to things that actually relate to HR. Much of HR has always been designed for the management of the HR department. And only with ESS and MSS, with employee self-service and managerial self-service, has that actually gone beyond HR to end users. And so far, if we look at some of the really cool products today for with dashboards and things for end users and profiles, that stuff, I think that they're making good progress in using that because it's not too painful. But do people love it? Maybe we have a ways to go, William, before we get love into our human capital software. But,
Ray, what do you think here? I mean, I think oftentimes really good technology gets complicated by organizations and their bureaucracy or process, but I love your take on this topic of adoption. Did we lose Ray? I think we may have lost Ray.
I agree with
there he is.
I agree with my esteemed panelists on this topic. I think the challenge is we have way too many tools, inside the organization. And, we've got to find the ones that people like to use and get them to use them. Otherwise, people are just overwhelmed with the number of tools to do something. I give you a great example is just, collaboration technologies. I mean, you got the one you use, you got the one you like to use, you got the one the work environment has thrown onto you, and then you got the new one that someone thought would be cool to throw in. Right? Seriously, I can't do that many tools and log in that many times. And so back to the point of, we got to make it easy and use the ones that people love to use. So
yeah, but how do you do that? Because it's relatively easy nowadays for me to sign up for some collaboration tool, send it to my team and start using it without HR or even IT kind of jurisdiction. How do you control it when you can set a lot of this technology up so fast without HR or IT?
It comes back to how you get paid or how do you use it. So if, for example, that you require everyone, like here's something that's kind of novel. If you're in a professional services firm and you're worried about knowledge management and sharing, and you basically say, look, if I don't see the presentation, you don't get docked for those hours and you get paid. It's just pretty simple, actually. I think the incentive system drives everything you use.
It's a bit extreme.
If you want to communicate on some other tool, that's fine. I don't see it. I'm your manager, and too bad. That's the project. I think we got to get a little bit more discipline here in terms of like how we get some of these roles. Now, of course, we got to make sure those are good tools. If they're hard to use, people will switch, and so that's
sure.
part of it. But I saw some stat yesterday that just basically made me barf. I think you guys were all in the same room when we saw this stat. 34% of applicants would quit a job if they were told they had to cancel their Facebook account. I was like, what? there's these stats up there. I'm just like, who are these people? But I agree. There are a different set of values and different sets of classifications. So.
All right, so we've got about 15 minutes left, and there's a couple of topics I want to get through. So I want to jump to the next topic here, and then we'll try to leave maybe 5 or 10 minutes for some questions at the end. And this is probably a well-debated topic around performance management. I know many on the program today probably just went through their annual performance review and probably either liked it or probably more so disliked it. I know, Burson and Katherine have been long evangelists for blowing it up as it is today. So I'd love Katherine to start us off here on should we get rid of the traditional process? What needs to change, if anything? I know you're probably a contrarian on this topic, Katherine. So take it away.
All righty. Well, yes, not just blow it up, detonate the whole concept as we're seeing it today. The first thing is, are we managing performance or are we trying to optimize performance? So let's look at when we talk about managing performance, it sounds like I am going to manipulate you into doing what I want you to do or something like that, and I don't like that sound at all. How can we take the ability to perform that people innately come to the office with, if you will, and free them to be able to actually perform, and then look at how do we make that performance better. So if we look at the absolutely heinous way that we generally do performance management today, what's it called, rank and yank and all that kind of terminology that goes through the ways that many companies are looking at performance management, that end-of-year thing, if you look at the lost productivity, and it's gargantuan, in what happens in that performance review period, where all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I didn't do this thing that I was supposed to do, and I see it on my goal list, and now I'm going to be demerited because I didn't do it because it didn't even make sense for my current view of my job. It is not. This is something we can fix, and you don't need that once-a-year thing is not doing you any good. What might do you good is to actually look at the concept of continual coaching, of actually helping people do their job better. That is, helping them perform better on an ongoing basis instead of this once-a-year thing. I love the word heinous because that's what we're doing to people. It's a heinous act. So fix it.
All right. So, but it sounds like you're saying is it's okay to do annually if you're doing the continuous feedback and it's not just this one-time thing, that it's something that is ongoing. Is that fair to say? Or you just want to blow up altogether?
You know what? I would detonate the whole thing. But I think that one has to have some measure at some point in time that says, I want to give you a bonus for exceptional performance, or I want to give you a raise, or, I'm not giving you these things because you really did not perform as we expected. So somewhere along the line, there's going to be something evaluative that we need to do, and it's usually tied to pay, or letting somebody go totally from your work staff. But so you do need something somewhere. But the kinds of somethings that we are doing today are not getting those, are not reaching that.
And William, do you agree or disagree?
I absolutely agree. I think that here's the bit. Performance management, at the end of the day, it's who does it serve? Are you trying to actually make the employees better? Are you trying to make the company better? And a lot of people would lie to themselves and say, well, both. That's not really the truth. That's not really the truth of the matter. You're either using this to lord over people so that you can gather data and then ultimately either make them better or fire them, and you're documenting that using performance management. Or, and I've seen instances of this, that it's not that type of tool, and you're just really taking the individual and you're trying to make the individual better. So at one level, we have to grapple with, what is this really here for? Why do we have performance management? Is it to make the company get more yield and manage people, or is it to actually make the people better? There's another issue at play, and that is the issue of meeting people where they are. And so let's say the four of us worked at the same company. God forbid. But let's just say we all four worked, and we're all sitting next to each other in cubicles. The truth of the matter is that all four of us would want something different out of a system called performance management. Katherine would like weekly feedback, and mostly positive. William would like, now I'm using the first person, I'd like monthly feedback, but all negative. I would just want to know the negative. Ray wants annual feedback. He knows how he's doing. He doesn't need anything else. And Jason wants daily feedback. He wants affirmation. So we want different things out of these systems, yet we apply kind of a cookie-cutter approach that tries to get everyone in the same thing, the standard. I think that if we dealt with standards, yet something else to be blown up, because standards actually don't work, because the humans want something different out of performance management.
So let me ask Ray this question. I mean, I would argue most technologies today can do all of those, accommodate for all four of those users, right, or all four of us that want different things out of the system. I guess, Ray, maybe the question is, do you agree or disagree? And then what do we need to do to change the organizations, or what do organizations, I should say, need to change to accommodate for all of those different users or those different expectations or needs?
We're basically trying to get to a system where we have mass personalization at scale, right? And that requires a lot of context. And I think that's basically what William was describing and what Katherine was describing. But what I can't figure out is, was that a buy or a sell? I'm completely confused on that one, right? I was on a sell mode because I'm like, these things aren't working. Performance management systems aren't tailored. They're not customized, right? So I'm like, what is this? What's going on here? So I think we're all in agreement, but I'm not sure if I'm on the buy side or the sell side. But I think getting that context is right? People want to be treated like humans, right? And that is the important part. And so knowing how and how often people want that review, knowing what incentives you want to put in front of people, knowing what type of career development plan that you want to put next to that will drive the type of performance management systems. They're all there. And then the question is, how many do you offer in terms of like what can you kind of manage inside a company? So I'm in agreement with everyone, but I'm not sure if I'm buy or sell.
So I guess what you're saying is managers need to be managers at the end of the day, right?
Right.
Yes, they do. They need to do their job and be managers.
All right, Liz, I think we'll probably get to two additional topics here, and then we'll open up to the audience. The next one is around learning. I would argue we're seeing a little bit of renaissance in learning. A lot of industry data, particularly even from Burson, has said that there's been a lot of growth in terms of spend of learning management systems, and I think we're just seeing in my opinion, I think there's lots of innovation that's happening. In particular to learning, we're seeing MOOCs kind of rise in popularity. So, but I guess my question is maybe a little bit different. Is, are we seeing this in organizations today that they are becoming more learning-centric organizations, or is it just buying the new system to kind of keep doing the same thing? So I'll turn this over to Katherine and get her take on where is the state of learning today. Are we seeing organizations becoming much more learning-driven?
That is a fascinating question here. I'm glad we're going to be able to talk about this. In the study, the interest in learning, the percentage of people that said that learning was critical had tripled since last year, just in the last year. But when we looked at also the concept of readiness to provide the training, the learning that people needed in the organization, 75% in 2014 said they were ready, and only 40% said that right now. Why is that? Because what we're thinking about in learning has changed. It's not that I need an LMS that's going to manage course registration and you're going to sign up for a course and then you're going to go take it, whether it's on your iPad or whatever. That's not the question. It's right now, it's all the different ways that people learn are much more informal. We learn from each other. I learn from Ray and William and vice versa, that kind of thing on a daily basis. And how do we ensure that people get to learn the things that they need to know when they know it? So we're seeing much more embedded learning at the point of you're hovering over a screen, you're trying to do your financial report and there's something but you're sitting there and it pops up and says, do you need some help? And that's learning. I am going to teach you at the point of execution, if you will, something that you seem not to know. And there might be something where we go into more detail if I need more detail. But the concept is totally different than that. Let us go take a course and sit there for 2 hours, and then we'll have a test, and then we'll see if you know it. And yes, for compliance things, that probably is never going to go away. But when we look at the real issues of learning in the workplace, it has radically changed. The big challenge is going to be if we want to keep track of that learning, it's going to be very hard to do that when we're looking at this much more informal learning environment.
So, Katherine, it sounds like you're a buyer here, where Ray I sense is a seller. Ray, what do you take on the state of learning today?
I think we're at the state where people don't want to learn anymore, unless there's an incentive behind it. And what's actually happening is employers want to train, and employees don't want to learn, and there's a gap. And we have to fix that gap. And a lot of the stuff that we're spending time on is around digital transformation. And if there's an interest there, what we're really trying to do is make sure that on the front end, we're bringing on the right people into the organizations, people who are inherently curious about learning. And that requires what we call digital artisans, folks that have right brain, left brain capabilities. You got a lot of science, technology, engineering, and math. I need to balance out with anthropologists, design thinking people, creatives, philosophers, right? People of systems thinking, and mostly the curiosity and the willingness to learn. So I think the systems are great. I just think that the gap between what people want to do and people want to teach and push versus people who want to self-learn and find, that's really the problem.
So it sounds like you want TED-like content in your learning management system. No?
Definitely. Definitely.
William, where are you at on this topic?
Yeah, I'm a buyer. I really look at learning and I say to myself, if it's learning for learning's sake, that's pretty boring, and I think it's boring to Ray's point. It's boring for employees. But let's say that the employees want to learn. Let's flip that for a second. We should meet them. If they want to learn something, we should be able to provide that for them as an organization. And I think there's a relationship between learning and engagement and retention. But it's meeting them, and it's highly personalized, to Ray's point earlier. If some employees don't want to do it, we shouldn't force them, because then we don't get to the outcome. We actually create a de-incentive and perhaps crush morale because we're trying to force them to learn. So the folks that don't want to learn, that's totally kosher. But the folks that do want to learn, we should be providing the things that they want in the ways that they want them, whether or not that's classroom, online courses, etc. We should provide the content if they want the content.
Well said. Very well said. All right, so let's hit this last topic, and then maybe we'll turn it over to some questions. So the last one here I wanted to touch on is this concept of talent mobility. I was just in Europe last week, and this concept I think probably is more so applicable to many of the European countries than it is in the U.S. or elsewhere. But I wanted to get everyone else's take on talent mobility as a concept. So, talent mobility or succession, being able to manage it effectively to try to reduce recruiting costs. Is talent mobility just something there's a lot of fodder, but companies just are unable to do to manage succession, or is there something there? Is there something that we really need to be spending some energy around? So, William, why don't you take this one again around talent mobility? Are you a buyer here? Do you think it's an important concept? What can or can't we be doing better?
Super bullish on this, and here's the deal. My uncle's advice when I got married was very simple. Vietnam vet. He said, listen, here's the deal. Marriage is as simple as if you don't take care of your wife, someone else will. I think that the axiom that most HR leaders believe in is 80% of the value comes from 20% of the workforce. Whether or not that's true or not, I think we could have a real debate about that. But that 20%, those A players, high potentials, high performers, if we don't provide opportunities for them, someone else will. And as an organization, we should invest. If we don't invest in them and their mobility and what they want to do next, someone else will. And we do it at our own peril, I guess is the point.
Ray, what's your take on this? I hope you're taking care of your wife here.
Well, I don't have the wisdom of William's old uncle, but no, I think it's very important, and I think part of the reason that if you don't take care of talent, but I'd rather see like 40% of people carrying the load. Why is it 80% that are sitting there not delivering? And I think really it's about how do I identify the next 30% to be that 20%, and I think that focus area will give a lot of organizations something to work towards.
Katherine, why don't you round us out here, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
All righty. I think mobility is important, and I think we need to really think about it in terms of our whole succession. Like if we look at succession today, it's primarily, if our CEO goes away, where in the general market would we replace him or her? And I think that what we need to spend more time with is not just looking at executive movement, but more of a grooming of people from the very time they enter the organization. So there's the idea that everybody who's hired, and Mobile used to do this. They used to think of every new hire has the potential of growing up in my company to be the CEO. And that's a very interesting way to look at people, that you would never hire anybody who could never be an executive someday as they move through the organization and give them the experiences that would lead to that. But I think we often spend too much time not looking at pivotal jobs in the organization and making sure that we've got people ready to go into jobs that are really, really important that may not have executive titles on them. So there's a lot we could do here, and a lot of looking at the concept of backfilling as we're planning for mobility, that we actually get people so we know that in 5 years and 10 years, even if the robots are getting there, that there are people who are ready to do the things that the organization will need to be done. And a lot of that is through that movement. And we particularly see this when we look at things like global readiness and preparing expat-type positions in the global market.
Awesome. So we've got about 3 minutes left here. In summary, there's three things that came out to me today. And first of all, thank you guys. The first is just the concept around big data. I think data and understanding our data is going to be hugely, hugely valuable, and something that I think probably we would all agree companies really need to start to get their hands around. The second concept of personalization and everything, right? So personalization and performance, personalization even in learning is a very, very important topic that many HR departments really need to be thinking about. And then the third, according to William's uncle, if we're not taking care of our employees, someone else will. I think it's actually a very good one because, you look at unemployment rates not only in the U.S. but around the world. It is a very tightening labor market. So if we aren't, really looking after our employees and delivering everything that we need from a learning and training or development or even work productivity perspective, there's a likelihood that they're going to find that somewhere else. So with all that said, I'd love to kind of turn it over to Andrew here and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Absolutely, we
Andrew.
do. Yes, thank you, Jason. Thanks, panel. This was fantastic. What a great discussion. So I think to go back to the performance management question, Jim has a really interesting take on that, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Jim says, I love the idea of continually coaching, but how do you marry a detonation of annual reviews with the compensation conversations and changes that employees tend to expect annually at the very least?
Great question. William, why don't you take us away there, and then we'll go through the line.
Oh, good God. I think, I think it's scale. How do you do it at scale? Ray said something earlier about highly personalized and scaling it. Like if you have a 10-person firm, I think that's doable. A 20,000-person firm, my gut tells me that it breaks somehow, some way. So I struggle. First of all, I think it's a good idea. I just think I would struggle with how to scale it.
Well, part of that has to do with the managers are the ones that are going to be responsible. So it puts a lot of burden on a manager, and that coaching should be from the managerial level. If that's not an HR question, it's not an HR person's responsibility. It is a manager's responsibility. And those two things can be separate, but you still need to have something that talks about compensation.
Yeah.
That's a different,
yeah.
But that could, yes, compensation is logically related to performance, bonuses, all that sort of thing. But I think it's a different discussion than how your day-to-day performance is.
And in managers, what you have is you have different types of managers, some that are very supportive, and they want to see you grow outside of them. And then you have managers that want to keep you in a spot. And so that's still, in American business, that still happens where no matter what you're doing and how you're performing, you could be performing really well, but they don't want you to leave because it creates disruption on their team. And so how do you deal with that? How do you treat that? How do you train them? And again, I think in a 10-person firm, I think you could do it. I think you could absolutely do it. I think that it's 200-person, 2,000, 20,000. At one point, you're still going to have those managers that are reluctant to do the right thing.
Ray, I'm curious. You run a business. I'm curious to get your take here on how do you manage the feedback with the compensation question. Uh-oh, I think we lost Ray again. I guess I'll give my take, and maybe Ray will join us back here. But I think it's all about transparency. So, as long as you're having that transparent discussion, not only about an individual's performance, but also the transparency around the organization and the performance of the business, it should almost go hand in hand. I mean, the last thing that you want to do is tell employees how great the business is doing, but then also say, oh, sorry, you're only getting a 1% merit increase. So to me, I think it's all about kind of ongoing transparency, not only around performance of the individual, but performance of the organization, whether the team, the group, the department, but also the business. So you can marry them at that point of time where you need to have that conversation. It's a great question, and it's not always an easy one to answer because there's also kind of organizational dynamics that play into it. We're about 2 minutes over, so what I think I'd love to do is kind of leave it at that. And first of all, thank HCI and thank all of you for joining us today. I completely enjoyed the discussion. Thank William, Ray, and Katherine for their participation as well. It's always great to get your input, your opinions, and so thanks for all. I know you can find all three of them on Twitter. I'm sure you can find their email as well. You can always reach out to HCI if you have any specific questions as well. But thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to the next chat we have.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.